Today, we have a discussion with very distinguished guest, Konstantin Eggert, who is an international correspondent from the Deutsche Welle, the German-based media, and he has quite a wealth of knowledge regarding the Middle East and as well on the Russian foreign and national policy. So today I'd like to discuss with you, Konstantin, a few questions, obviously tied to the Middle East and also to the Russian role. But I'd like us actually to start with the recent 12-day war, Iran-Israel war that took place last June. And there were a lot of different, different information and different reports regarding the effectiveness of the Iranian strikes on Israel and the Israeli strikes on Iran and against the Iranian nuclear program. So could you please tell us about the effectiveness of those strikes? Who actually won that war? Israel, Iran? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Denys, for having me. And I'd like to explain briefly to the audience that I am indeed a Deutsche Welle international affairs correspondent. I am based permanently in Vilnius, Lithuania. I do dedicate more time to Russia and Ukraine, but because of my education and previous experience in the Middle East and the fact that I speak Arabic language, I do help out Deutsche Welle DW Jerusalem Bureau from time to time. So I spend quite a bit of time in Israel and did over the last year. So because of that, probably I'm qualified to speak on both topics. But let me start with your question. I think that, of course, it depends on how you define effectiveness. I do think that, militarily speaking, it was effective. I mean, I used to serve in the army. I can tell you that if a country has full control of another country's airspace, that's victory. That's definitely a very significant thing. So in this respect, yes, the Iranian air defenses, the Iranian Air Force, at that time at least, seemed to be non-existent, which, by the way, shows to the world and to Iran's neighbors that, well, it's not invincible at all. Its military powers were probably always exaggerated and were mostly based on, Qurani militias in the region, terrorism and stuff like that, rather than the conventional military power. The extent to which the Iranian nuclear program was derailed is still a matter of debate, including in Israel. And I think it will continue because this is something that is quite difficult to assess. I think the consensus is that it was not destroyed completely. It will take some time to rebuild, but that it's rebuildable. The issue, of course, is that in such circumstances, if you lack certain capacity, here we're talking about both capacity to weaponize and capacity to deliver, for a significant period of time, then, well, you become vulnerable, first of all, and secondly, basically, you become a weaker player. And this is something that I think everyone has agreed on, that there was damage. I also think, and here where Russia probably comes into the conversation for the first time, I think it's interesting that there are reports of Iranian scientists being sheltered in Russia. This is unconfirmed, but if it is indeed so, and Russia did not have and Iran did not have to do much, they just should have sent a plane across the Caspian Sea, then it is also showing the extent to which Russia is still prepared to back Iran, even in the face of this, well, visible, if you wish, defeat, military defeat. And this also means that for Russia, every single ally counts, even if it is a weakened or weak ally. Now, when we come to the effect of these strikes on Iran itself, Well, I'm not in there. I'm not traveling there anytime soon, as I'm on the Iranian blacklist. But my understanding is that there was a bit of a kind of rosy picture in Israel and in the West of the Iranians rejoicing at their Ayatollah's army being pummeled by the Israeli Air Force and kind of seizing the moment to rise up against the regime. That's not how it happens, and it's not how it happened. It's clear that there are two factors there. First, Iran is a very, very tightly run police state. And in these circumstances, any kind of activity that would be anti-regime would be immediately construed as treason, and people lose their heads in a very literal sense over much less in Iran. That's number one. Number two, I do think that in the Iranian tradition, political tradition, spiritual tradition, societal tradition, to the extent we understand it, there is this intense patriotism, which some people call actually even imperialism or jingoism, to use a British term, which prevents lots of people from rejoicing at their own country's defeat, even if the country is run by a regime they detest. Again, I'm not inside Iran. I do not speak Persian, so I'm speaking from basically, some experience and literature. So I cannot be a major expert here, but it's very clear that it did not shake the foundations of the regime, at least visibly. Whether these strikes provoked some kind of, let's say, dissidence or provoke debates and disunity inside the regime remains to be seen, although I think this will be logical. It will be logical to presume that this is the case, because there is generational change there in the leadership, because the system is corrupt, we know it. And in such circumstances, even from the practical term, kind of trying to sideline someone who seems to be hapless, who seems to be guilty of basically not preventing this assault, would be a logical thing, both for people who are in the Revolutionary Guards Corps, in the army itself, in the secret police, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure recriminations are flying. I'm sure that maybe some heads will roll, but in such regimes, as it is, let's say, in Putin's regime, things are completely opaque. So you cannot judge it until it happened. So let's wait and see.
Yeah, exactly, Konstantin. And actually, I'd like to follow up a bit. I understand you don't have a crystal ball, neither do I. But in your opinion, because there is some kind of a ceasefire which is holding up right now between Israel and Iran, but there were some declarations from Tehran saying that the war may come at any moment, that the ceasefire is quite fragile. In your opinion, what are the prospects for the renewed direct conflict?
I think there are prospects for that. And it's not for nothing that Israel is trying to, for example, strike in these last days, trying to hit Houthis in Yemen harder, because that's, of course, one of the avenues of possible Iranian assault on Israel. But I think that this renewal of activity will be not that easy for Iran to relaunch. And I also think that we've seen, for example, the UK moving towards snapping back sanctions on the Iranians. That's not good for the regime, because it definitely constrains it. We do know that they're used to living, the regime is used to living under sanctions, but it will not be good for them. It's not making things easy. And I suppose that what they could think of in such circumstances is probably more terrorist activity, more hits against Israeli interests across the globe. Look, I don't want to compare, it sounds very crude, but the type of thing that we've seen in Argentina in 1994. And I think if you look at the at the situation, let's say in Syria and in Lebanon, we have weakened Hezbollah, weakened Islamic Jihad, and all these proxies are weakened. So we do know that poor people's weapon is very frequently terrorism. So I will not exclude Iranians resuming these activities, probably sometimes in a more dangerous way, because for now it seems like the regime there doesn't look towards some kind of Obama-esque, new Obama spring in relations, Western relations with Iran. So I do think they will be very keen now to show that they are not down, that they are not out. Also to basically warn the Gulf states, the Arab Gulf states, that, we are not out of the picture. Don't think we're defeated. Don't think we lie low now. So I don't have a crystal ball, as you rightly said, but I think we should think about this.
Thank you, indeed. And since you have spent some time in Israel, I'd like to ask you, because the situation also with the Gaza, with Lebanon, with even with Syria is quite complicated. In Syria, there is a Druze problem, and Israel carried out some strikes to protect them. So I'd like you, first of all, to talk about the current political situation, how the inner politics in Israel work right now regarding resolving those issues. What are the main ideas and appetites, if I may use this word, in Israel regarding Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, and the second issue that would be interesting for me is that is actually regarding the Israelis' Syrian policy, because there are different reports. There are some ideas even pushing in the direction of somehow disintegration of Syria, which I doubt it would be beneficial for the region. But so yeah, please go ahead.
As for the domestic situation in Israel, let's put it like that. Netanyahu, I think for now, his government is pretty safe. The Israeli opinion understands, it's not united. We do know that there are people that feel that this operation's gone too far, especially in terms of human costs, including in Israel. But I think generally everyone understands that this government is seizing the opportunity to end any kind of perspective for an independent Palestinian state once and for all. Let's face it, this is the main goal of Netanyahu that is being achieved in a very sort of let's say forceful way. Is very clear, but I think that this is the goal of at least this cabinet, and frankly speaking, it will be very difficult. Just as it is for Iranians to say, oh, very good that they bombed us. It's very difficult for even opposition Israelis to stand up and say, well, by the way, we do think that it's very nice to have a Palestinian state. I think it should be our goal. No. After October the 7th, and, I've been to some of the kibbutzim where this massacre happened, a lot of things are much less possible in the Israeli society, including, in spite of the fact that it's still a vibrant democracy, in spite of the fact that there is kind of a peace camp or more, let's say, more accommodating sector of the society. It's very difficult to go back to this sort of, Arafat, Clinton, Rabin type of conversation. It doesn't help, to my mind, that alas, the current administration, Palestinian administration, West Bank, is so weak and headed by, let's face it, even not yesterday's, but I would say the day before yesterday's men, mostly men, and some women, then they cannot present any kind of political alternative to and any kind of viable conversation partner for Israel. So for now, I think we have this government staying. in Israel and doing whatever it basically wants to do. And let's face it, Arab solidarity with Palestinians, and I learned it when I was still a young student in the 80s, is just a figure of speech. It is always, was and still is sometimes convenient for domestic consumption and for some sort of foreign policy propaganda. But let's face it, no one in the Arab world is prepared to do anything for the Palestinians. So they will remain, especially the people in Gaza, will remain in essentially the mercy of Israel. And I think that this is something with which we will live for, well, the foreseeable future. As for Syria and Lebanon, it's a very interesting situation. I do share your point, by the way, that disintegration of Syria will maybe create more problems than solve. What we do know is that we now have the so-called secular regime of the Assad family, which was in fact a minority regime which had secular elements in it, substituted by the regime of the majority, Sunni majority in Syria. My understanding, although I haven't traveled to Syria recently, my understanding, although I've been there before, my understanding is that this regime, this government, let's put it like that, does not fully control the not only the territory as such, but it doesn't fully control the Sunnis in Syria. And frankly, I thought that there's going to be much more disorder and much more many massacres of minorities than we've seen recently. I also think that, and this is what our sources tell us, it's nothing sensational that I'm going to tell you, that Syria is already a kind of political diplomatic battlefield between Israel and Turkey. And because of the Turkish government's hostility towards Israel, I think this current government, probably future governments, will still be interested in maintaining a link to Damascus. Of course, we're not talking about official diplomatic recognition, but some kind of stable conversation channels, which will ensure that there will be certain things that will not be happening in Syria to Israel's detriment. And part of it is the rumor, though it's something that was at least published by the Israeli media, rumored attempts by Netanyahu to convince Ashara in Damascus to keep a form of Russian military presence in Syria, limited to the naval stations in Tartus and Latakia, in order to curtail, to limit Turkish influence in Syria. Whether these considerations, which smack of 1908 Bosnian crisis or Agadir crisis, something pre-World War I, whether these calculations are true, whether the government still sticks to them in Israel, I don't know. Personally, I think that after the collapse of the Assad regime and after what Israel did to Iran, Russia lost a lot of its credibility in the Middle East. In the Middle East, they respect the strong. Respect is the most important thing there, but respect only sort of is accorded to the strong. Russia doesn't look like strong today. If you look at the slightly further north, at South Caucasus, what happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which is watched by Turkey but which is watched in the region, shows you that Russia becomes impotent even in what used to be for 200 years its backyard. So I do not think that this calculation, if it still exists, will bring Netanyahu anything. So as for a question about Lebanon, my feeling is that actually the future of the country is now very much up in the air. Syria never fully recognized, Syrian society never fully recognized Lebanon as a separate entity. With Iran now gone from Iranian influence still there, but the Iranian power there
from the calculation.
Is diminished. So yes, we're still talking about the Shia being the biggest group there, but their impact, their ability to influence events is much diminished with the not complete demise, but still weakening of Hezbollah. And I think this is something that maybe the Syrian government would like to address, but only after it controls Syria fully. And this is not yet the case. The country is ruined. Law and order is, let's say, patchy, to put it mildly. So although I think that Lebanon is hanging by a thread, but on the other hand, they're used to that. But I do think that the removal of Iran from the larger Levant is a very significant factor. And I do think that it will, in the end, have an impact on, well, not necessarily borders, but on the way relations with states there are forming.
So somehow we can actually state that Israel is becoming the so-called superpower of the immediate region.
Yes, I think it's true. And let's face it, the expansion of diplomatic recognition of Israel, the fact that I'm certain that in my lifetime, not in my lifetime, maybe within the next 5 years, we'll see establishment of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, is a very significant factor. These relations are not warm. Although if you look at the number of Israelis in the United Arab Emirates, where I've recently been, it's stunning. You wouldn't even believe it. I mean, there are fewer Israelis in Turkey now than it is in the Emirates. And I think that this gradually is changing the picture. And in this respect, yes, Israel is the superpower. As I said, they respect the strong. What Israel's done to Iran will not be forgotten for a long time. It was, of course, secretly applauded by the Saudis, the Omanis, the Bahrainis, of course, among others. So I think that, yes, Israeli positioning in the region is different now than it used to be even during the Abraham Accords.
Mm-hmm. I understand. And you've been mentioning Russia and the Russian presence, namely in Syria, for instance. I'd like you to tell us what has Russia lost, how changed the Russian position in the region, what it became of the famous Russian power, in quotes in brackets, in this region, and how it will impact the Russian positioning on the world stage. Because, as you have also rightly said, in different parts of the world, people see and understand who has the power, who has not the power. And so what kind of implications of the let's say the Iranian-Israeli war on the Russian position in the Middle East and in the world, and as well as the change of regime in Syria, obviously.
Let me start with what remains of Russia. That's where Russia is still influential. Russia is still a global player on energy market, even in spite of the sanctions. And this is something that cannot not be noticed by regional powers, because most of them, as well, as look at the Gulf, you look at Iran, they are actively involved in energy markets. So in this respect, Russia will be a factor. It is geographically closer to the Middle East than, let's say, Brazil or Mozambique or Angola, who are also players on the global energy market. But this is probably one of the few good news for Putin. In terms of bad news, it's, of course, the collapse of the Assad regime, which proved that Russia's support is ephemeral, that it's nothing. I also think there was the sort of combination of the Russian alliance with Iran and Russia's inability to hold on to Syria. That reflects also on the Iranians, of course, and doesn't reflect on them positively. Actually, I would say that if you look at Russia's regional partners, Iran today is probably the only one worth speaking of. And this is very clearly an alliance of two outlaws, an alliance of two pariahs. And this is also noticed, let's put it like that. Then again, Russian weaponry. Here, even the war in Ukraine comes very clearly into the picture, and the Azerbaijani lightning operation to retake Nagorno-Karabakh. You just see that Russian weaponry is not up to the level that the Azerbaijani army using even Turkish weapons, Israeli weapons too, seems to be much more modern, much better trained. So yes, Russia possesses nuclear weapons that even Donald Trump or Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron have to take into account. But if you're talking not about nuclear war, but about the conventional military power, Russia doesn't look good. So in this respect, I presume there are already, because of the sanctions, a lot of problems for Rosvooruzhenie, the Russian state arms exporter. But even let us imagine tomorrow Putin withdraws from Ukraine, all sanctions are lifted, everything is hunky-dory. Well, people will be looking at the way Russian weaponry basically showed itself, performed on the battlefield, then I think there will be a lot of doubters here. In this respect, it's also an aspect of Russian weakness that one has to take into account. Such things work over time. There are long-term contracts and things like that. But looking into the future, the Azeri operation, as well as, of course, the war in Ukraine, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and, of course, the inability of Iran to defend itself with the help of, at least partially, Russian weapons. All these famous as something, la, 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 la. It's all now there for everyone to see, and that will also have implications.
You know, Russians and Iranian, they have signed a strategic partnership deal in January 2025, and to my amazement or to my surprise, unlike the Russian-North Korean agreement, the Russian-Iranian agreement doesn't have a mutual defense clause. But nevertheless, I was surprised that Russia limited its response to the Iran-Israeli war only to condemnations and basically proposing the mediation offers. Why Russia wasn't more proactive?
Because it's weak, because it has no way of helping Iran without confronting the Israeli war machine, which is formidable. And basically, how can it help? There are some elements, there is Russian weaponry in Iran, maybe there are Russian devices, or I don't think that Iranians need them for a long time. So what can it do? Tear up diplomatic relations with Israel at a time when it's already isolated? No. Offer mediation was the only thing that basically Putin could do. Sure, you have to remember one thing, and I'm not joking. Putin grew up as a KGB officer, as a secret police officer, in the times of Yuri Andropov. At that time, the KGB brass were obsessed with Israeli/Jewish influence in all spheres of life. Putin grew up with this idea that Mossad is the most effective security intelligence service, that Israeli weapons are super duper, that Israel is everywhere, that I'm sorry to say that, I'm just recounting the sometimes anti-Semitic ideas, cliches that these people have in their minds since 1970s. Jewish bankers running the world and so on forth.
The famous Jewish comploit, as we say.
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy,
Putin. There was a lot of this earlier, in let's say 15 years ago. People say, "Oh well, Putin is the first non-anti-Semitic Russian head of state since long." It's not that. It's the fact that he thinks that you'd better be on friendly terms with Israel and generally the Jews, because if you are their enemy, they're going to hit you hard. So it's anti-Semitism in reverse. And I'm saying it in all seriousness. This is the thinking that informs the top echelons of the Russian secret police, which is now running Russia. And this is also maybe not the only one, but it is also one of the factors of their restraint.
I understand. And I know that we are running out of time. So I'd like you maybe also ask one question, not related to the Middle East, but related to this important agenda is the United States-Russia negotiations regarding the end of Russo-Ukrainian war. What is your take on it? Are you skeptical?
It's very simple. It's very simple. There will be no peace deal in the foreseeable future. Putin is not interested in it. Putin is interested in dragging his feet, prolonging this process. He's interested in talks about talks in order to continue pounding Ukraine, in order to continue producing more drones, in order to continue basically having his friends in Delhi and Peking invent new schemes of supporting him by buying his oil, gas, and whatever. One has to understand, this is not the war for territory. This is the war for Ukraine as a sovereign state. Putin is not so much interested in territory. Putin is interested in having in Kiev a puppet government that will be waking up every morning at 8 o'clock, calling Moscow and asking, do we have coffee or tea for breakfast? No NATO membership, no EU membership, no strong army, full compliance with Russian demands, a semicolon. This is what Putin wants. And as long as he is not achieving it, he'll continue the war by hook or by crook. And in this respect, I have absolutely no hope in these negotiations. And alas, so far we haven't seen any kind of real professionalism on the parts of the Trump administration. Maybe it will rearrange itself, recreate new diplomacy, whatever. But so far we've seen failures. So far we've seen either failure to understand Russian goals or desire not to understand them for purely domestic reasons. So in this respect, I'm very pessimistic about the possibility of this administration, for that matter, probably any administration, to achieve any kind of lasting peace. So the only way forward for the West is actually to arm Ukraine, support Ukraine, and finally break with the habits of saying, oh, we don't know what will happen in the future. No, I think a firm promise of membership in the EU and NATO, of course, after fulfillment of all the conditions, would be the right political step. It will scare Putin, who, as the Middle East experience shows us, only respects fools. When he doesn't see force, he doesn't respect his opponents. But when he sees power, he retreats.
And to be honest, I completely share your vision about the failure of impossibility of any potential peace deal between Russia and Ukraine in the foreseeable future. Thank you very much, Konstantin. I know that the time is up and you have a lot of other issues to attend to. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Denis, and all the best.